There's a reason this was such a big deal when the Edmonton Oilers went out there in the 2021 NHL Entry Draft and straight up refused to draft this player. Let's go over Jesper Wallstedt, one of the best goaltending prospects in the world for all hockey players out there, if not the absolute best, and how he has been an absolute monster so much to the point that it still boggles my mind every time I think about Edmonton and the trade and the draft and what they got in return and all that stuff. So, before we get underway with everything that has gone down about Jesper Wallstedt and what he has done previously, let's go over the news from just today. According to the Swedish Ice Hockey Association, Jesper Wallstedt is the positive case for Team Sweden, or at least for what used to be known as Team Sweden, because obviously there's no Team Sweden, there's no Team Canada, there's no Team USA, there's no Team Czechia, there is no anything anymore for the World Juniors because they got cancelled, but Jesper Wallstedt was indeed the one positive case that was highlighted from Sweden. He is also granted the right to publish his name, so we are wishing the best recoveries for Jesper Wallstedt. Hopefully his symptoms are not bad. However, when we go over the profile of who Jesper Wallstedt is, there is so much to talk about aside from him just being the guy from Sweden who happens to be the goaltender, because this guy, for years and years and years, was touted to being a potential franchise goaltender ever since his mid-teens. You talk about Spencer Knight, you talk about Yaroslav Askarov, Wallstedt was in that group, and in the minds of many people, he was de facto #1 amongst everybody. The reason for this is because, to put it simply, he is just so gosh darn good at stopping pucks that he was progressing through the ranks of Swedish hockey quicker than anybody had ever done so before. By the time he was 17 years old, he had already made his debut in the SHL, playing a game and actually doing very well in that game despite the fact that he lost. He had a .155 goals against average and a .944 save percentage in that game. Now, you have yourselves what was his season after that and his draft year. He had himself a pretty interesting debut in the SHL as a full-time member of Luleå, posting up a .908 save percentage and a .223 goals against in 22 games played. He was 12-10-0, and even though this isn't really the best number for a goaltender to post up, you gotta remember he was still a teenager in his first full year in a pro men's league, playing with guys who are 25 plus. He went out there and actually looked like he belonged, and he didn't look too out of place. At the World Juniors, he was also pretty good, a .923 and a .240 goals against for Team Sweden, again, as an underage player. So Jesper Wallstedt was just getting exposed everywhere to higher levels of hockey than he's used to, because in the J20 Super Elite, hey, as previously as the season before, as a 17-year-old, he was putting up some pretty good numbers over there as well. Which is why it was seen as such a shock that Jesper Wallstedt dropped in the draft as far as he did. He was projected to going 8th by Future Considerations, 5th by McKeen's Hockey. He was the #1 ranked European goaltender by NHL Central Scouting, and Craig Button had him at 7. However, he dropped all the way down to 20. And it was kind of crazy because Edmonton was the team that was picking 20th overall. They had the pick and they had Jesper Wallstedt in their sights. You had Sebastian Kosa, who had went earlier to Detroit, 15th overall, the first goaltender taken in the draft. And a lot of people were saying, okay, Edmonton, you kind of need a goalie. You need a goalie. You need goaltending here. You got the forwards. You have some defensemen in the pipeline. What you really need now, because Stuart Skinner is not guaranteed, is that #1 goaltender of the future. And then they traded the pick away to Minnesota in a trade where they acquired the 22nd overall pick and the 90th overall pick. Now, to be fair, Xavier Bourgault, the guy they took with the 22nd overall pick, is a pretty good player. And Luka Munzenberger, while he's not really the highest profile name who was taken with the 3rd round pick that the Oilers got, I mean, he's still a prospect there too. But the fact is, Bourgault and Munzenberger together, in my opinion, do not equate the value that a Jesper Wallstedt has established for himself this early on after the draft. Because, yeah, we noted last season he played as a full-time SHL guy at 17, 18 years old. This year, hey, guess what? He's 18 turning 19. He turned 19 already in November. He's played 17 games for Luleå, has a .182 goals against average, and a .923 save percentage. He is 9-8-0, has 2 shutouts on the year, and he is one of the best goaltenders in the league. And he just turned 19 last month. Look at this. He is the 3rd best overall goalie in the SHL in terms of save percentage, And he is the second best in goals against average, so there is no stopping this guy when it comes to how quickly he has gotten used to the goaltending systems at higher levels of play and gone out there and adjusted his game so. Even at the World Juniors this season, he had 2 games played. The first one was Team Sweden's victory over Russia. That one was 6-3. Sure, he let in 3 goals, and sure, he went out there with a 9-0-something save percentage. He had 27 saves on 30 total shots. But the game after that, the very next night, against Team Slovakia, it's a 3-0 Sweden win, and you say 3-0, oh, it sounds like Sweden absolutely whooped Team Slovakia, eh? That's what it looks like. No, that is not what happened, because Team Sweden went out there and gave up 48 shots on goal, and Wallstedt saved every single one of them. He had some really good highlight reel saves over here, snatching the puck out of midair, tracking things so properly. He went out there and was absolutely flawless on the second night of a back-to-back. This is what the Swedish coach said about Jesper Wallstedt and that victory. He was terrific. If we're going to have a shot at this, he has to be an important component for us, and he really showcased that today. He also is the best goalie of the tournament, according to Sweden's coach, and even though he might not have had the best statistical profile, that honor belongs to Florian Bugel, who had himself a 9.75 save percentage in 2 games. Wallstedt had a 9.615. There still is some very, very good things coming out of Wallstedt that we had seen in this tournament, mostly highlighted by that Slovakian game where he stopped 48 gosh darn shots. And you gotta believe it, man, while Connor Bedard was going out there getting 4-goal games, we had ourselves the opposite side here. Jesper Wallstedt making headlines for himself too, because as a Minnesota Wild prospect now, this guy has been put on the map as a guy who is more legit than we ever could have hoped for. Because all the hype that we had about this guy when he was a mid-teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old, up until now, there's been nothing that has gone out there and proved us wrong about his reputation. And so, for Edmonton, to me, just the idea of taking Bourgault and Munzenberger over Wallstedt in the draft, it just blows my mind still. Again, I like Bourgault, I like these guys, I like the prospect development curve that Bourgault will exhibit, but it's just so strange to me, dude. Jesper Wallstedt is as close to a franchise goaltending prospect as you can get, and you said no to that. In fact, 19 gosh darn teams said no to that. Detroit chose Kosa over Wallstedt, and I get it, Kosa's really good too, but there have been a little bit of hiccups here and there in the development that he has had, especially after the draft too, but Jesper Wallstedt, man, he is the guy that has captivated my eyes for years now, and many hockey scouts and analysts will say the same thing. It just blows my mind every time I think about this. But of course, you know, there still is a little bit more time before we see him suit up in the NHL for the Minnesota Wild, most likely. The Wild do have themselves a pretty interesting goaltending situation right now, but of course, heading into the long-term future, I think everybody kind of thinks that Wallstedt is going to be the full-time #1 guy for as long as he's able to stay in the league, right? But either way, talk to me in the comments. What do you think about the Oilers, Bourgault, Munzenberger? You have yourselves Jesper Wallstedt here, the return in that little transaction over here for Minnesota, being a beast. Hopefully he's able to recover properly and fix himself up well enough to go back to the SHL and whatnot. And maybe even the World Juniors if they do reschedule that, because that was a possibility that was floating around over there. Yeah. Edmonton, in my opinion, you guys done goofed. I know you guys love Stuart Skinner. I know Mike Smith is back. But at the end of the day, you had yourselves a chance to get a franchise-caliber goaltender. And, you know, having one of those alongside of Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and Philip Broberg and Boucher definitely would make your team a little bit more well-rounded, but I mean, suit yourself, right? Talk to me in the comments. What do you think about this player and his profile? I hope you enjoyed this video. Ash Rolls 99. And bye.